With us now, MSNBC Justice and Intelligence reporter Ken Delanian and former Manhattan Assistant District Attorney Rebecca Roiphe. Ken, what do we know about this meeting there in Florida and why these two prosecutors resigned?
Good morning, Anna. Yeah, this is exclusive reporting from our colleagues Vaughn and Laura, and what they learned was that these two prosecutors were concerned after they were asked to participate in this investigation that's being run by Jason Quinones, the U.S. attorney down in Florida, that seeks to knit together a vast alleged conspiracy against Donald Trump, going back to the Russia investigation, but then continuing on through the Jack Smith investigations and otherwise. It's a bizarre theory, and I think this just reflects the unease among career prosecutors within the Justice Department about this case. And so Quinones felt compelled to call a meeting of the major crimes unit in his office down there, about 36 lawyers, to try to reassure folks. We don't know exactly what was said in that meeting, but just the fact of the meeting and the fact of the resignations, I think, is a signpost for unease about this case, Anna.
And we're also learning more about what those 30 subpoenas that just went out and the materials that they were after and what was in those subpoenas. So, Ken, what can you tell us about that?
Yes, these subpoenas seek information from 2016 and 2017. Normally not something you see in a federal case because there are statutes of limitations. And they seek information related to the intelligence community assessment, emails and text messages and other supporting documents. The intelligence community assessment into Russian election interference in the 2016 election. And what's so significant about this is a special counsel named John Durham already pored over all this material. He already investigated this. He found no wrongdoing. He didn't even find grounds to criticize this assessment when he filed his final report in 2023, yet the Justice Department under Donald Trump is going back at this.
So the U.S. Attorney's Office apparently bypassed standard protocol by having leadership signed off on these subpoenas rather than line prosecutors. Rebecca, how unusual does this seem to you?
Quite unusual. And these sort of departures from normal policy are a sign, a kind of red flag that something has gone wrong. And especially that, along with the resignations, ought to give us pause and make us notice that perhaps something has gone on with improper politicization of the Department of Justice.
Ken, let me come back to you because meanwhile, there's some developments in the James Comey case. His defense lawyers just filed a brief arguing that the government's evidence against Comey is, quote, tainted. What's their argument here? What kind of response has the judge provided so far?
There are a couple of angles here, Anna. One is that they are suggesting that an FBI agent may have gotten access to privileged communications between Comey and his lawyers, and that may have bled in front of this grand jury, which would be improper. But they're also saying that Lindsay Halligan may have sort of essentially kept the grand jury captive in a room until they returned an indictment. They revealed that initially when she presented the case, they returned a no bill. They declined to indict, and she kept them there all afternoon and then finally secured an indictment by 2 votes. And this is exactly why they are trying to obtain the transcripts and recordings of exactly what Lindsay Halligan said to that grand jury, Anna.
Rebecca, your reaction?
Yeah, well, I mean, grand juries are normally secret, and I think that this is, this reporting, if accurate, is certainly a reason why the judge would want to take a look at what happened within that grand jury, because it is potentially extremely troubling and could, if true, lead to the dismissal of that indictment. Okay.
Yeah, along with our colleague here at the White House, Laura Barone-Lopez, we have from sources that down in the Southern District of Florida, Jason Redding Quinones, he is the U.S. attorney who was picked by Donald Trump to lead that office in Miami this past August, that he is effectively overseeing what is amounting to a sprawling investigation, a conspiracy investigation. And this is important. Folks are going to continue to hear about this in the months ahead. It is the idea that the Biden administration, the Obama administrations, individuals who were law enforcement and intelligence community officials were seeking to undermine the candidacies and presidencies of Donald Trump over effectively the last 8 years. And what is underway is at least 30 subpoenas were sent out on Friday by this office. But just before the number 3 in the office signed off on those subpoenas, 2 junior assistant U.S. attorneys had resigned. I am told that at least one of them was asked to do something that was outside of their realm of comfortability and what they believed would violate their ethical responsibilities. Now, it's worth noting that the number 3 in the office, the executive assistant U.S. attorney, was the one who signed off on those subpoenas. Usually you don't see somebody in a leadership capacity, sort of like how Lindsay Halligan in the Northern District of Virginia signed off on the indictments of of Tish James. It's uncommon to see somebody that is not a line prosecutor who is ultimately overseeing such an investigation. I'm told that other prosecutors in the office are on, quote, pins and needles because they fear that they are going to be asked to take part in this investigation that the president has been very explicit that he has said should lead to the arrest of President Obama, James Clapper, John Brennan, even people like Hillary Clinton. It is a vast investigation here, in one in which down in the Southern District of Florida is causing concerns over prosecutors being asked to do the job that they do not feel comfortable is based in substance and based in one in which they should be actually asked to go and move forward with such not only subpoenas but potentially indictments.
Vaughn, thank you for your reporting. So, Barbara, the executive assistant U.S. attorney, Manolo Rebozo, signed at least some of these 30-plus subpoenas. Is that standard protocol?
It's not. As Vaughn said, typically you would expect the line prosecutors who are handling the case to be the people who would sign subpoenas. It sounds, though, like this is some sort of special project that they're putting together, some sort of special unit. Executive U.S. attorneys sometimes have in their portfolio special projects. So it sounds to me like this executive U.S. attorney is going to be leading whatever this effort is into this conspiracy investigation. But I do think it's noteworthy that this is not being handled the way a routine case would be handled for a violation of the law. Instead, it is being handled as a special case with a high-level executive member of the team handling this. The other thing that I thought was noteworthy about the reporting is that the grand jury to be impaneled is going to be in Fort Pierce, Florida. That, of course, is the district, the portion of the district, the Southern District of Florida, that has one and only one judge, and that judge is Aileen Cannon. I don't know that we should be suspicious of everything Judge Aileen Cannon does, but we do know that her track record in the Mar-a-Lago case with the documents was first to impose some really extraordinary hoops for the prosecutors to go through at the time of the search. And then, of course, the dismissal of the case, finding the special counsel regulations to be unconstitutional.
Person has no relationship with the truth. They have no business on the federal bench. And there's two really urgent issues here. One is you see Donald Trump weaponizing the DOJ and demanding revenge prosecutions against his enemies, putting in cronies as U.S. attorneys to prosecute them. Imagine. And now, remember, most of these 28 have been confirmed. Imagine if one of these judges, who can't say that Donald Trump lost the 2020 election, like took this loyalty test to get their robes, was sitting and presiding over a case where Lindsay Halligan in the Eastern District of Virginia was prosecuting Comey. Imagine being a defense attorney and filing motions in front of one of these judges. At that point, you've got a bit of a banana republic. The second big problem is 15 members of the Democratic caucus, for some reason, have voted for these judges. There is no moral, political, or really historical reason to vote for any of these people. They're politically compromised. They have no business on the federal bench.
So that's what I wanted to ask you about these 15 senators. And I want you to explain to us, A, what you think the failure here is, because I want you to, is this a failure of leadership? I mean, I think of like Mitch McConnell, who is known as was a very successful kingmaker when it came to the Supreme Court. And I wonder, would Mitch McConnell have 15 senators freelancing like that? So talk us through.
Comey has demonstrated his case before the case is formally started. In many ways, he already won. The disclosure surrounding the investigation has undergone a drastic change now, as event has taken a form that is very similar to a judge dismisses moment in the legal world. In this scenario, the career prosecutor seems to be increasingly worried about the upper management decision, and this concern is felt all over the Justice Department. When internal dispute escalates to this point, it is usually an indication of deeper conflict concerning the manners and the aim of the litigation, particularly when the case is as large as the Jimmy Comey case. To control the situation, the reactions like Trump is furious start to acquire a heavy symbolic meaning, which shows how much the legal harassment has become. in a wider perspective, the way the investigation are structured, getting people to liken them to previous political flashpoint, and more so to the ones that has to do with intelligence review and election years. The fairness of the procedure is discussed, and the accuracy that feel like an unofficial judge dismisses getting involved tend to exaggerate the discussions. So the presence of high-ranking officials who are the one to prove every normal operations create doubts about the level of trust and accountability within the organization. Hence, when the public sense that there is a situation similar to the James Comey case, it is much simpler to comprehend with the Trump is furious narrative gets to be supported by both the supporters and the critics. Concurrently,